Well, you ready, Christie? Let's, I know people
Yeah,
are going to still pop in.
sure.
We're getting up to 100 that are already in here. So we're going to get started. Gang, who's ever on the line, I know a lot of people are on the line right now. Welcome to Center for Victory's webinar, Self-Regulation Under Stress, and specifically around PI insights. We hope to dive a little bit deeper into this. As we go on next week. But if you haven't already, go ahead and mute your line. We'll unmute you at the end of the presentation so that you can ask questions and things of that nature. We had a lot of good questions yesterday, the one we did yesterday, but be informed that we will have more next week. And always like all of your feedback on topics and things of that nature. This is very high level. So we'll talk about this, but with me, Christie Cawley, our senior partner at Center for Victory. I know we have some other of our consultants on the line too, but her and I are going to go back and forth. It's going to be a little bit more her again today than me, but I'm sure I just can't sit here and not have this conversation, especially when it's Christie. We talk a lot together. I'm going to give everybody that wasn't on yesterday, Christie, your quote from the other day when you and I were talking. And to quote Christie, I'm afraid if I don't use my words, I'll lose them.
That's true.
So this is for all of us extroverts that are out there that need to talk. And it doesn't matter all the time what we talk about. Hey, we just had a great conversation.
Yeah.
Christie, let's jump into this. I'm going to hand it over to you. It's self-regulation under stress. So
Yeah.
Tell us what that's all about. Give us some tips from the Irish Hammer.
Sure. So again, thanks all of you for joining us today. Hopefully this is a little value-added information that can help you both personally and professionally in navigating kind of this new kind of crazy normal that we're facing, which seems to be changing with each hour. So in coping with COVID-19, I think there's definitely some key takeaways for you. But rest assured, some of these topics and some of these tips would be value added at any point in time. I think Maya Angelou said it best, and I used that kind of inspiring me to put this together to share with you. Her quote, famous quote, was that she learned along the way that people really won't remember what you said or remember what you did, but they'll always remember the way you made them feel. And I think when we're under particular strain and stress and pressure ourselves, those natural gifts that we have and some of our preferences for the way we prefer to communicate or solve problems or make decisions, sometimes those high drives of ours can go into overdrives. And I think there's some impact of the way we're making others feel in the course of maybe turning up the volume on some of those natural tendencies. So that's kind of what this is structured to review with you today. In keeping in mind that, we really look at, you're a whole person and we're all complex creatures, and there's a lot that's going to affect our behavior. Right now, many of us are experiencing truly a convergence between who we are personally and who we are professionally. We're finding ourselves, maybe for the first time ever, working in a more unstructured way. And maybe we have a lot more colleagues that are actually related family members, in our workspace with us. So there's a lot of noise and there's a lot to navigate. And Eric, I know you're an expert on this, so if you want to kind of chime in on this side of it, I think it'd be helpful to our viewers.
Yeah, absolutely. When we look at this is not an end-all be-all today. We're talking about the PI, and that what we measure with the PI is just motivating needs, behaviors, and drives. But when people are under stress, that puts another dynamic into play. When you look at the neuroscience of things, when we're under a lot of stress, we don't have the capacity to think. So there's three things. Those of you that asked should I write this down? Yes, here's some things that you need to know. When we have stress, and that's what we have right now, right? And some people deal with it differently. but when you have stress and that stress becomes too great, one of three things could happen. One, when we're stressed, we lose the ability to think and be logical. Okay. So we can't think, we can't be logical, right? The second piece about that is when we stress, we regress. And Christie's going to talk a lot about that throughout this PowerPoint. And that regression is the reactive state of some of those behaviors rather than the responsible side of them. Okay, so there's a difference. Am I using my gifts in a good way versus using the gifts that I have behaviorally in a negative way? And the third piece that we all want to be aware of is that when stress is too great, we all naturally become challenged in our ability to relate to one another. So in our relationships, and what we need right now at this point in time, more than we've ever needed it before, is connection. And when we don't have that, then we go and we regulate in different ways that aren't good, and that aren't good for our relationships, aren't good for our work environments and things like that. So, that's just a little hint of the neuroscience. We can definitely, as next week, as Christy and I have talked, we should probably do more on this, but really help in that. But hopefully this will help package it in a way that you can understand it, because people do act differently under types of different stress, and the productivity that you might have got while they were in the office might be different than what it is at home.
Sure.
People are dealing with different things, and things are different focused right now, and just to have a little fun, and hopefully, nobody takes this the wrong way, but when we're too worried about toilet paper, our kind of job goes down the toilet, so to speak. But that's just a little light, guys. But it really comes back to, if I'm getting my needs met, if I'm in connection, if I know what I'm supposed to do, if those drives and needs are getting met, it's going to mean that the behavior is positive. If they're not getting met, that behavior is going to get a little bit more reactive.
Sure. I think that's really helpful to kind of keep it in context. So with this visual you have in front of us, we often say there's a lot of things that are going to affect your behavior. And what you might find is in these different kind of dimensions, some of them might be popping and they might be a lot louder than they would be on a regular basis. So I think really the basis of this, and we use this theme quite a bit with all of our coaching and our training and our advisement, is you really need a healthy dose of self-awareness and authenticity. You are who you are, and you're going to be more of yourself under a lot of stress. So just be tuned into that, and we'll go through maybe some tips for regulating it. So we're not making any assumptions or defining who you are or saying this is how you are, but this might just lead you to some insights that might be helpful and healthy for you at this point in time. So we're thinking of you as a whole person. There's a lot going on in your head. There's a lot going on in your heart. And a lot of us have a lot of varied experiences and exposures that might help to filter our interactions and our thinking and our behavior right now. So we can really learn from one another if we're open about it and a little vulnerable and asking for help where we need it. So for those of you who are familiar with PI, and I know quite a number of you just from seeing your names would be, but we have some new people joining us today. You might not be as experienced with PI, so I'll try to give you some conversion for this just so that you have a context for it. This is referring to some PI patterns, so predictive index patterns. Once you take the behavioral assessment, different patterns will occur to help you better understand where some of your high drives are and your low drives. We'll go into that in a few minutes. What I want to point out is on the left is a pattern that's depictive of you at like a resting point, right? So behaviorally, you are naturally maybe more wired to have a certain balance of drives. And under stress or strain, that pattern might be amplified. And that's what you're seeing on the right-hand side, just as a point of comparison. Some people are more visual like I am, and I need to see it. So that amplification you might be experiencing for yourself, and it might feel like you're just having to take deep breaths, right? You're just feeling some pressure. It might feel like you're feeling even more rushed or even a little scattered in the way you're approaching things. Your pace is off. Your tone is off. You might be feeling really tired. And it's a kind of like mental tiredness, not necessarily physical tiredness. You might find that this is surfacing at different times during your day or at a certain pattern each week as things are kind of different, right? So understanding what amplification feels like for you, I think is a go-to to-do item for building self-awareness this week. Yeah. What is really triggering that?
Yeah, I think this is a good one, Christy, in the fact of, I know you had this slide deck before, but this is a good one for today's times, because, you know, what this is saying really is this person is feeling a lot of uncertainty, which I think we can all agree with is, you know, what's going to go on and things like that. Some of us deal a little bit better with it, but I think in this current situation, some of us might deal okay with it, but others are really going to struggle.
Yeah. And when we're dealing with a lot of ambiguity, whether that's something you're naturally comfortable with or something you try to stay far away from, it looks like danger, right? You might find yourself in kind of stretching to accommodate this uncertainty, a real kind of casualness or an informality in the way you're kind of moving through things. And that might be really a different observation for people to be making about you. You might typically be kind of more buttoned up and more sequential in your thought process or your evaluation of things. And you might be feeling like, okay, we just need to make a decision. And it might come across as a little haphazard. For some of us, we're kind of comfortable. That's like the world we live in. But for other people, it's going to feel really hard for you, but it's going to look really strange for other people interacting with you. It's not going to feel and look like you that they know. So that can raise anxiety in other people. So just be mindful of not only how you're handling the stress, but how you might be demonstrating it. So again, that's tip number 2, how you're presenting with this amplified pattern. So just to keep this short and sweet, remember, if you are really looking to learn a lot more about PI, we have lots of trainings on that, but typically it's a lot of time to really learn this science. So we're skinning this down for you. In no means, form or shape are we trying to say you're any of these drives on their own. But to understand self-regulation, what we're really focusing in on are where your highest drives are. So for those of you who have your PI reports or patterns in front of you, I want you to pay particular attention to that self pattern, right? Your natural state, how you naturally may prefer to make decisions and problem solve and communicate, whether you tend to prefer to kind of work solo or as a member or part of a team in a more collaborative way. Looking at your patterns, I want you to pay particular attention to the drive that you might find furthest to the right on your graph. So as we were looking at these, the one that would be furthest to the right, either the A, the B, the C, or the D. Some of you special folks have a few drives that kind of stack up. We'll kind of hit on that, but not in a lot of depth. So for the A, again, I'm just going to keep this pretty straightforward. And for those of you who wish, I think we just posted in the chat box a way for you to take the assessment if you haven't done it in a long time, or if this is new for you and you're just curious about the topic. So go ahead and take it. We'll get you all the information you need. The dominance drive, the drive to exert one's influence over people or events. The extroversion drive, I like to think about that as communication, the need for social interaction. My name is Christy. As you can imagine, I have a higher B. For those of us with a higher C drive, that's a drive for consistency and stability. Someone with the C drive as their highest drive is probably really feeling the effects kind of what's going on in the unknown right now. And then for that high D drive, the drive to conform to rules and structure, almost that need for certainty and precision in being confident in making decisions. So our kind of like little internal cheat sheet is the high A drive tends to be a more independent decision maker, right? We're kind of used to, we like our own ideas, and we're kind of clear on what our goals are. Higher Bs tend to have a lot of ways of describing and explaining things, a need to kind of, they have face-to-face communication. That's a natural high drive. Higher C, a real need for being able to work in an organized way, a sequential way, a routine way. They like the routines. And then high D really likes to be confident that the information they're evaluating is the right information to make good, solid decisions or solve problems. So a lot of that is going to come into play when we look at those natural drives, the needs that satisfy those drives, and then the resulting behaviors. So this is a quick graph to kind of give you a sense of there's a continuum of expression. I don't know, Eric, if you want to chime in at this point in time, just kind of getting people oriented to this.
Yeah, so I mean, going back to a little bit of what I mentioned before is, you know, you can be responsible with some of these drives, or you can be reactive with some of them. Somebody that may have that higher A, trapped at home all the time. You know, maybe you're the boss and you can boss everybody around at work. Maybe it's not a great thing to do even at work, but you can't come home and do that, or everybody's, everybody doesn't want to be around you. That need to collaborate. If that doesn't, with a lower A, that, to want that collaboration when you don't have it. I know my daughter, she's a high B, low A, loves that collaboration, wants to invite everybody over. If it was up to her, we would have 50 or 60 people here. It's like, now, we can't do that, but we have to make sure that she's getting that. And thank goodness for technology. But I say that tongue in cheek because I can hear her in her room now all the time, 10, 11 o'clock at night, just chattering away. I'm like, what is she even talking about? Right. But she needs that time. And some of us need that, you take somebody that has a very low C, that's very impatient and now is very reactive in their environment. We get even more high strung, and that can wear us down. It can just go to mental fatigue because we can't do it physically. We do it mentally, and it just goes, woo. And just that craziness. And it's somebody that needs, with that higher D that feels that need that they can't do things with all the ambiguity that's going on nowadays, wants to control everything. Some of that's okay because you can plan and here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to do for this, but you can't control everything. And again, making light of, some of the things that we've seen with this, but a real thing that it was actually an article, I think it was this morning or yesterday morning that I was reading, that the whole idea around why people want toilet paper is because it comes in bulk, and because when we buy it, it's bulky, it feels like we have something, and it gives us a sense of control. So the reason why people are buying toilet paper is because we feel in control when we have it. Doesn't logically make sense, but psychologically it does make a lot of sense.
Yeah. So that's a good point, Eric. And when we look at this, remember, with what's being measured naturally is it's on a continuum. You're not necessarily at a fixed point every single day or for every single situation. So you have some fluidness in this expression just naturally. So this isn't something you haven't experienced before. You probably have. You probably just haven't had the pressure of experiencing that amplification day in and day out over the course of now weeks, or going into maybe a much longer duration than we anticipated. So we want you to kind of bring that self-awareness here, what's in your head and what's in your heart, and how you're navigating this is something we want to keep some balance to for both yourself and those around you, because we want to emerge from this stronger, healthier, more knowledgeable, right? But with our relationships intact, right? We don't want to do harm. So I want you to think about these expression points as almost wherever you naturally are. This stress serves as kind of a volume lever. So that volume's going to go up, and when that volume dial switches, those drives are going to get further away from where you naturally are. So some of us have a very expressive pattern to begin with. Our normal pattern is a pronounced pattern. You're going on to overdrive. Those of us who tend to be a little bit more moderate or flexible, a little bit more neutral, adaptable, wherever we are, our drives are going to amplify. So I'm just bringing your attention to this continuum of expression, not to define where you are, but what you might be experiencing and how you might be displaying these amplified tendencies. So somebody who's normally very supportive and cooperative in creating ideas and setting goals and a plan of action may actually be amplified right now and maybe more challenging, maybe more forceful. And I'm going to talk to you about how that might translate for impact in just a moment. Somebody with a much higher C drive may normally be kind of calm and cool, composed, can deal with things that come out of left field, but right now, they may almost be shutting down. It's just too much, like everything is just blown up. I can't even deal with anything, so I just can't deal with anything. So you might find yourself there. With that high D, we might be even more strict or rigid in our ability to respond or react. So again, wherever you are, no judgment. I left my judgy self at home. But wherever you are, be mindful of what that's feeling like right now, so you internally can monitor and regulate when you're feeling that amplification, recognizing what it is, and then some tips for dialing it down. So with that in mind, this is an open discussion, so this will segue us hopefully to some conversation or some questions for us or some scenarios. I'm just going to kind of take you through this. Again, for those of you who are familiar with Predictive Index and have your natural graph in front of you, if your highest drive, or the one marked furthest to the right on your profile, 10 is your high A, then you might best be described or recognize yourself as independent, kind of liking your own ideas, decisive on any normal occasion, happy to take control or take the lead, in unsupervised situations. Your amplified behavioral, how you're displaying, may come across as dismissive of others. You may really have highlighted or have more of an intensity on that task focus, like we've just got to get this done, we've got to work through it, we've got to make this happen. And as a result, your communication style may be a little harsh or more blunt to recipients and people around you. Again, that may not be your intent, but with that amplification, this is a really real impact of how your style might be presenting right now. Remember, it's also in concert with amplified reactions of those around you. So where you giving a one-word answer, right? And some of you are nodding your head, you've been doing it all week. A one-word answer may normally be just fine. It may be really feel like criticism or diminishing somebody's need or opinion. So some techniques around that. Here's my best suggestions for you. Be mindful of listening, okay? And try to challenge yourself to listen to understand what someone is bringing to you versus listening to basically respond and just tell them what to do. If you're doing virtual meetings, and we're going to do, I think, a little bit more work on this going into next week, talking about newly formed virtual teams and some good practices in orienting. But if you are meeting, start those meetings with some personal sharing, demonstrating care for how others are doing. along with, again, a focus on what we need to accomplish. And make sure to celebrate wins or achievements of your team. That also goes back to your home, right? So everybody's world is turned upside down. I know my 17-year-old daughter is now, schooling herself here at home. So making sure that at the end of this week, we recognize some of the unique things we've been able to accomplish this week, or some experiences that we've had, to kind of look at the positives and kind of keep that tone. I hope that's ringing a bell for a few of you. I'm going to proceed this way through B, C, and D, and then we'll open it up to general discussion. So I'm going to switch now to high B, a need for social interaction. I'm definitely on overdrive with that. Sometimes those of us with a much higher B drive, we do tend to have a lot of words. And sometimes we explain what we've just said. We like to explain what other people have said. You may really be over leveraging that talent. And it may actually be a distraction to the others living with you and the others trying to work with you. You may find that you may be reaching to pick up the phone and call people to talk to them rather than just emailing them. So be mindful of what information can just be exchanged versus what needs to be discussed, because everyone's environment is a lot noisier than they're probably used to. Be mindful of also oversharing your concerns or your opinions on the state of the place. It may actually feel good for you to get it out, but it may be creating additional anxiety for the other people in your surroundings. Plan key times or reasons to connect with colleagues versus just kind of springing it on them. And of course, virtually, wherever possible. And be mindful of boundaries at home. And initiate Zoom chats with friends and families to kind of anchor yourself each week, just to give you that social outlet. So hopefully those are some good tips for those of you. And I'll also do a plug for a charity that I enjoy. You can also foster a cat or a dog. They're great listeners, right? You can talk to them really without end. Highest C, a need for routine. Interruptions might be difficult. We love our high Cs. They're the nicest people. It's a high patience drive. They love to be that person that can be counted on, that trusted resource. They take great pride in bringing things to completion. And right now, all of their go-to strategies and preferences, a lot of them have just been torn apart. They may be feeling very overwhelmed. You might be feeling very disorganized for yourself. And that can also lead to a little passive aggressiveness, real annoyance with other people not doing things in an organized way. So just be mindful of maybe your response or reactiveness to that. Set a structured plan for each day and try to engage others to get some commitment or buy-in. The best advice I have is try to be more realistic about what completion looks like with a day that you don't have as much planning or control around. You might want to seek some reassurance from a supervisor or a trusted colleague on how you're prioritizing your strategies and your ability to get through and complete things. Bringing people in versus silently suffering might be a really good solution for you. And then I'll wrap with the highest D, which again, if that's your drive that falls furthest to the right, you have a natural need for accuracy and specificity, a need for information. You don't like to make mistakes. You may be really questioning the why right now, why this is happening, why are we implementing certain procedures, why is this now a priority when last week it wasn't. Your question or focus on having that why answered in a way that's thorough enough for you may be perceived as being criticizing. It may come across as a criticism or negativity. You may be exhibiting some unrealistic standards for how others are adapting to this newfound environment or pressure. Remember, we're all different. We all also have different influences and responsibilities in our home life, and we're trying to figure out how to meld all of that right now in the fishbowl. So just recognize that what might not be a pressure point for you or something you have to deal with may be front and center for some of your colleagues. You might be feeling out of control and feeling a little bit anxious. So the best tips I have, look at how you're contributing to solutions. You really have typically a lot of detailed knowledge about things and a way of evaluating. Bring that to the table as a solution offering. Look at your language and shift from asking why, right? Well, why is this the idea? Why is this put in place? Why did you do that? To help me understand, what did you consider in coming up with that recommendation? Just looking at the wording or the bridging may really help to keep those working relationships intact and house relationships intact. And I think the best advice came from one of our senior partners who we were chatting about this. And she said, my best advice for highest days in this situation, control everything you can and accept everything you can't. And I think that that's a good rule of advice for all of us right now. Okay, so I'll stop at that point, if you can imagine. I hope some of these tips have raised some self-awareness. Just be mindful of how you're projecting your experience or beliefs on others, and also recognize that others are projecting on you. I think will go a long way with some self-awareness and authenticity, with our ability to self-regulate maybe some of these stressors or over-amplifications of natural tendencies. Be thoughtful about your approach and how you're communicating. People are sensitive right now. People are going to be maybe a little bit less tolerant of unknowns and uncertainty, and add a little grace, right? I think a lot of us will come out of this more intact if we can present ourselves in a little bit more of a graceful way. So those are some quick tips and strategies. I know this isn't certainly exhaustive. I bet you all have a lot of great tips that you've had, and we'd love you to share them.
Yeah, I think especially with, as you recognize amplification, Christie, with folks, if you recognize it, treat it. Don't wait till it gets out of hand. Like if you're working with somebody and you recognize, hey, they're like way overboard, make sure you connect with them, see what you can do, because it might just be that a certain need's not being met. And a lot of times that is the case.
Yeah.
But recognize it for what it is and don't let it continue to drag on. Just, recognize it, do something about it, have action towards it. But yeah, I mean, if you want also, we'll open it up here for questions. But if you want, are there any other topics that you all, I know we have a lot on the line, if you all want different topics or anything for next week, if you want us to go deeper into a certain area, either write that in the chat or send Christie or I an email.
Sure.
We'd be happy to do that next week, as we're already planning on our webinars for next week as well. So feel free to share that either in the chat or via email. So questions?
I see a good question. Appreciate it coming from a contact of mine. The PI, the question is, will the PI change based on your stress level? The way that we see that presented is typically a change between your self graph, that top graph on your report, and how your second graph or self-concept graph appears. So that's where you'll see that amplification. So for those of you who haven't taken the PI in a long time, your self-concept graph may not be giving you a current snapshot. I think if you really understand that base pattern of yours, you're a little bit more informed to understand or recognize what that amplification may feel like for you. If you understand my natural high drive is a high B, again, I'll just use myself as an example, whether I have a view currently of that self-concept or not, I can feel that intense need to just start talking, right? To start explaining, to start interrupting people. If I'm mindful of it, I can understand where that's coming from, right? And it's coming from, like, I'm here, I'm working from home. I'm not leaving the house. I'm not going and seeing people, right? It's definitely driving it up. So I have to watch that over communication, because it's not necessarily helpful to me. It's not really going to solve anything for me. But number two, it may also be distracting from other people.
Yeah, here's another question, Christy. Good question. Thanks, Fallon, for this. And this could lead to another topic for next week. But when we recognize the amplifications, what are some tips to reset back to our normal PI? Great question. We could go down each one of those. We could go factors, or we could go factor emphasis combinations with the PI. But when you think of somebody that has an over amplification where their A is high and has gotten higher, tips to reset that is really, okay, what are they looking to do if they don't, because with what we know about high A's, if they don't have their thumbprint on something, they tend to get more amplified in their behavior. So talk about strategies or ways to challenge them. I know with my coaching clients, I had 2 yesterday, both high A's, but they're open to the information, right? So they're saying, hey, look, what should I do? And they're saying, well, my staff wants this or my staff wants that. Both of them were CEOs. And I'm saying, hey, look, just make sure you're giving them the information that they need. Just because you don't need it doesn't mean they don't need it. And do it often, do it consistently. I think if you see somebody withdrawing a lot, which you could see in a couple different factors, that could be an amplification of a really, the A's going really low, the C's going really high. Interact with them, given that interaction. And, I know, like Christy, I used your example today, Christy, in the webinar that I was given for a group as a tune-up. We got on the phone the other day and it was supposed to be a quick call, but because we don't have anything real structured or scheduled, I looked at my iPhone when we got off of that phone call, Christy, and it was 55 minutes. So, it can be that. It can be just connecting with somebody, maybe not necessarily to get anything accomplished, but when you see that over amplification, just bringing it down. Maybe I need to talk through some things before I go and do my work. A lot of us take for granted that we walk into work and say hi to everybody. Some people are thinking, wow, I'm glad I got rid of that. Others of us are like, oh, I wish I had that back, because that's my 10 or 15 minutes to come in. And I know I talked to another CEO yesterday, and he said, hey, that's what we do every morning. We virtually get online. Now they have a smaller group. They're only about 15, but they come into a virtual, hey, everybody, how's it going? And I know for us as consultants, getting on the line, we did it twice. All of us did it twice last week. We do it every Monday morning just to check in with one another. With the C drive, that amplification, it can go really, really low. With that, just bringing it back to reset, some of that just needs to be better time management. Could be better time management. With a high C that gets amplified, that could be just helping them figure out a process or where they're more comfortable and not forcing anything on them. It's ironic for us. I mean, Christy, Tammy, she's highest C, and C's a really low drive for me, as my D drive is. It's interesting that she's gotten more done outside the office, where I've gotten stuff done more inside the office, even though that's just one of those things. She feels more comfortable there. She gets more done, and that's okay. Some of us, like as me, I can't do it. Like there's too much practice.
I'm laughing here because maybe she's getting more done because you're in the office.
I wasn't going to go there. But
again, we all have to kind of keep this in mind. So I think getting back to that question, what do you do? Okay, one, we want to build our own capacity, at least recognize where those big easy buttons are being hit, right? That's what you want to be mindful of. Take a time out. As much as we feel like we don't have time, you really do have time. You have time to take a pause, You have time. It's now Thursday. So think back on this week, right? Think back on this week. How would you sum up your interaction with your work team? How would you sum up your interaction with the team that's now part of your home, right? You may have adult children, little ones running around, your pets. You may have an extended family member who's staying with you, right? They might be quarantined with you, whatever it might be. You might be an essential worker and going back and forth, right? And you're coming home to a whole world that's now existing that when you came home at the end of your day before, this wasn't all in place. You didn't necessarily have everybody in your house all day. So this is a disruption, right? This is a huge disruption. So take some time, take a deep breath. You might need to go and sit in your car and listen to some music, just get away. You might need to wear some headphones while you're at home, and you may not be used to working that way, but those might be some techniques that you have to just kind of like basically filter out the noise. You may need to do a charter or an agreement with everyone who's now active in your workspace. Kind of what's our norm for today going to be? What does everybody have that's a priority focus? Like right now, I said to my daughter, like, okay, 2 o'clock, I actually have to be on the phone. Please take the dog outside, because she always starts barking the minute that I get on a webinar. So, you know, just kind of incorporating her into my plan for the day. This morning, she had to get some work done, and I just stayed away from her. I didn't go for my morning coffee and chat with my daughter. So I think, again, understand what those little triggers are for you. Look back on your week. Were you doing more of the directing and delegating and talking? Was it one-way communication? As you wrap up your week, you might want to balance it and say, hey, team, tell me what's going on for you. What do you need more of me? What more do you need from me this week, planning for next week? Where am I adding stress? Where am I being helpful? Ask for that feedback. I think it's really helpful, and I think it's healthy. For those of us who are higher Ds, you know, you have high standards for yourselves, high standards for others. You might need to keep your judgy self in check, because that may be how other people, and people, you know, they want to meet expectations. So make sure that the expectations that you have for yourself, for those sharing your workspace, for your team, are reasonable given the era that we're in right now. I think a good dose, a healthy dose of reasonability and some grace and some forgiveness, I think, is really what we're called to do right now to retain our relationships. I hope this has been helpful.
Yeah. Hey, Christie, just one more question here, because I know I've got another webinar here at 3. One more question, and then we'll wrap it up. But if you do have ideas, tape them down in there. Send us an email at info@Center for Victory. Morgan put the link there. If you haven't taken the PI, tell us you've been on the webinar today, and we'll get you those results, because you'll probably need them again next week if you pop in. But the last question here, Camille, thanks for the question. I think these are great solutions to help us de-stress and be aware of our behaviors and others. Is there a way to help our coworkers recognize this as well? And you did put another suggestion in there, the EAP service, a great resource. I know a couple of our consultants, I think one is on the line, Wendy, who's down in Houston. You know, she's done some coffee chats with some folks just to go over their PIs to get some awareness of that. We're always open for that. But is there a way to help coworkers recognize that as well? Yes. One, you could share the video, just this and other links. 2, there are other things inside the PI software. For those of you that use the PI software, if you're a manager, go in and use that manager scorecard and take this time to take that out and talk about it with your direct reports, seeing what they're needing, because times are changing. So those of you that are familiar with that manager scorecard, those boxes might not be checked anymore like they were. This is a way to go back and say, okay, well, how do we check these boxes? What can we do together so that we're both part of the solution and not both part of the problem? So I hope that is a real quick answer to you. I don't know if you had anything to add to that, Christie.
Yeah, I think, any of these tools are really helpful. Again, for some members of your team who haven't taken the PI, I know a few of my accounts actually set up an open link in their PI software with a folder for, hey, you're at home with your family members right now, and there's just a lot of trying to navigate that. Having their family members take the PI, I think that's a great service that you can provide for your employees. And if you set it up with an automatic report generation, it's not as much work for your PI administrator. I think definitely using some of the tools, the relationship guides in the software, I think that's really helpful. For those of you who haven't used the PI, go ahead, take advantage of it. It's complimentary through us. Go ahead and take it. We'll get a report back. Your consultants, we're here for you. We're here for coaching calls. We're here to do more focused or select conference calls or webinars with your teams as you're trying to navigate maybe this new working relationship. So lean on us. That's what we're here for. So we're wishing you the very best, and looking forward to celebrating a lot of success coming out of all of this for all of you, personally and professionally.
Yeah, I did. I just got done doing a tune-up this morning. Had a lot of fun with a great group of people. We just had a blast. And I had all these slides ready, and we probably only got through about half of them. But there was lots of interaction, different profiles. There was almost 40 of us. And it was with most of us, I think about 30 of them I didn't know yet because it's just a new company. So we're willing and able to do that for you guys. We're here. We can do the tune-ups. It's not ideal, right? Because we have to deal with the technology. It's not ideal, but if you're not doing anything, and this is a good time to work on your leadership skills, relationship skills, and things of that nature, let's do it. Let's do it together. With that, look for some other emails. An email will be sent out. You can find this video on YouTube, on our YouTube channel at Center for Victory. You can share it with anybody. They do not have to be PI trained for you to share this video with. And with that in mind, with these trying times, all of you, just remember you're perfect the way you are. Absolutely, yeah. All of us are. Go out there and spread some love and cheer everywhere you go, and be a light to everybody. We all need it. So thanks for joining in, and we'll catch you all next week. Thanks again.
Thank you all. Take care.